Hare Krishna. So here we will speak now about listening as an active skill. Some people mistakenly assume that listening is an opportunity to sit back and do nothing. On the contrary, listening requires skill, patience, and self-discipline. So this is from the book Are You Listening or Just Waiting to Speak by Jane Atzed Grant. For some of us, the desire to interrupt another person when they are speaking is just too strong. We congratulate ourselves on the fact that we can finish their sentence, usually someone we know well. While this may feel like we have a deep connection with that person, we have in fact just hijacked their thinking and we are no longer listening. When we are truly listening and our attention is solely given to another person and they know they will not be interrupted, paradoxically their thinking improves. Research from MRI scans shows that new neural pathways begin to form and new connections spring into action, creating new ideas. Sometimes we are moved profoundly by what the other person says and we want to acknowledge them, comfort them, or reassure them, all of which are natural responses. Similarly, we may feel emotional, tearful, or angry about what has been said and respond. When we actively listen to another person, allowing them to continue with their thinking, we need the self-discipline to take note of our response to what has been said, while simultaneously refocusing our attention back onto the speaker. This enables the speaker to continue their thinking well as they articulate their thoughts, rather than being interrupted or hijacked by our own emotional response. Listening requires the self-discipline of allowing the other person to speak free. The top 5 myths about listening. Most people think they are good listeners, that they are good listeners. However, listening is a skill that we can all improve. Recognizing the characteristics of poor listening can help us overcome our limitations and create new habits to listen actively and attentively. There are some common myths about listening that can influence the way we feel and make the listening process less effective, so it is helpful to be aware of them. And before we go to speak about these 5, there is something else. Listening is an active process that we have to do consciously, and we can get better with practice. Okay, number one myth. It is difficult to learn how to listen. It is true that our world is increasingly noisier. We are bombarded with communications and distractions, making listening more difficult. In fact, it's difficult today to escape sound completely. 90 guidelines for community noise, the World Health Organization declared this: noise-induced hearing impairment is the most prevalent irreversible occupational hazard, and it is estimated that 120 million people worldwide have disabling hearing difficulties. However, our ability to listen well depends upon the circumstances of the communication, our personality, and whether we want to listen or not. The ability to actively listen well to another person is one of the greatest gifts we have as a human being. So it is worth putting in the effort to practice developing the fundamental skills of listening. The skills for active listening are not difficult, but they do require practice. As a leader, you will be acknowledged for your ability to listen well. You will get results, and others will want to follow you. You will also discover benefits in your social life. You will enjoy stronger relationships and gain a deeper understanding of others. Myth number 2. Intelligent people are better at listening. There is no link between our cognitive intelligence and how well we listen. We might assume because someone is bright and articulates well that they are naturally better listeners. While they may be able to consume and process more information quickly, they are not necessarily better listeners. For example, a very bright person may tune out of a conversation as they believe they have heard all they need to hear, rather than waiting and listening for the potential in another. People with a higher emotional intelligence, EQ, are more likely to be better listeners. Our EQ refers to our ability to understand and accept ourselves, seek to understand others, and manage our emotions in order to deal with the daily challenges of life. A key dimension of EQ is empathy, our ability to step into the shoes of another person. When we are able to quieten our own emotional reaction and give our attention to another person, we are able to truly listen. We all have preferences in the way we absorb information. Through my studies in neuro-linguistic programming, I was introduced to the concept of representational systems. There are 4 main systems: visual, the process of translating communication into pictures. Auditory, the process of translating communication into sounds. Kinesthetic, the process of checking communication with our feelings. Audio-digital, the process of internally checking communication by talking to ourselves. Being familiar with your own preference is useful in knowing where you can focus your attention in developing your listening skills. For example, someone who may have a preference for translating information into pictures may find themselves wandering off, drawing images in their mind as they listen. Someone who has a kinesthetic preference may check their own feelings as they are listening. There is no right or wrong way to process the information. It is just that we all have different preferences and you may have more than one. For example, I have a dual preference of auditory and kinesthetic. Myth number 3. Hearing and listening are the same. The fact that you might have good hearing does not mean that you are necessarily a good listener. Hearing is sensory and involuntary. You will hear the sound of a clock ticking or the hum of a machine in the background. However, listening requires your commitment and perception. As an effective listener, you will pick up on the non-verbal signals of the speaker, such as their tone, gestures, pace, and volume. Active listening requires you to use all of your senses in order to understand the meaning of what is being said. Myth number 4. Listening comes from maturity. People do not necessarily become better listeners as they get older or if they have more responsibility. They may become wiser due to their life experiences. However, they are not automatically better listeners. Without practice and the conscious effort to practice effective listening, there is no guarantee that listening will get better. In fact, it may actually get worse. It is easy to pick up bad habits for listening, just as it is easy for other skills that we often use. As confidence improves, we tend to pick up bad habits, rather like driving a car. When we first set out, having just passed our driving test, we followed the guidelines of mirror, signal, and maneuver. However, as we become more confident, we are more likely to be lazy and fall into autopilot mode. Some of the bad habits that we can potentially fall into when thinking we are listening include interrupting and jumping to conclusions, waiting to speak and hurrying the person, making assumptions based on our preconceptions, repeatedly re-emphasizing our own view. 5. Myth number 5. Gender affects our ability to listen well. It is true to say that men and women communicate differently. Women tend to place a higher value on connection, cooperation, and emotional messages, and men are more action-orientated, concerned with facts, and may feel uncomfortable talking about emotions. This does not mean that women are better listeners or vice versa. Men and women are likely to ask different types of questions of the speaker in order to clarify or understand the message. Therefore, their final interpretation of the message may be different. So thank you very much for listening. For today we will stop here with reading this book about listening, and I wish you a wonderful day.